They told her humans were strange little things with wild eyes and louder souls and hearts that beat like war drums in their ribcages, but no one warned her what it would feel like when one of them looked at her like that. Not with fear, with reverence, not with strategy, but something deeper and far more dangerous for a royal girl who had never known anything that wasn't wrapped in duty and sealed with blood. She stood beneath the glass dome of the Xenothian Hall as the Earth delegation arrived, their translator suits clunky, their posture clumsier, and their eyes alert and scanning like predators. But only one of them stopped, looked, and saw her as if her glittering skin and floating veil weren't armor, as if her crown wasn't meant to blind and warn and intimidate, and his eyes did not flinch, they did not flicker, they just watched, and her breath caught without permission. The neural silk of her dress tightened with her rising heartbeat, the guards flinched, the advisors shifted, the music continued. And still she stared back. And he didn't break away. He didn't avert his gaze. He tilted his head just slightly and smiled. Not the wide grin of Terran soldiers, not the crooked smirk of traitors, but something calmer, like he had all the time in the galaxy and only one thing worth looking at. Her heart stuttered, then thundered, and she blinked, unsure if her ocular implant had glitched because it made no sense. For a human to look like that, it made no sense for her to feel like this, and when he raised his brow with quiet curiosity, as if she were the one behaving strangely, she wanted to scream, but no sound came, only heat in her cheeks and a name, unspoken, tightening like a secret in her throat. They told her she was made for leadership, for sacrifice, for carrying a dying empire on shoulders forged from protocol and poison. But they never trained her to survive. The way her chest clenched every time she remembered that humans' eyes on her as if he saw not a princess, not a threat, but a person made of more than ritual and fate. She studied his file 27 times in secret. His name was Taran Rhodes, linguist and first contact ambassador, decorated twice. Survived 2 crashes, volunteered for assignments no one else wanted, and smiled in photos like he was waiting for something no camera could capture, and in every image her heartbeat thrummed louder than her logic. She should not have let herself be curious. She should not have replayed the moment in the hall, or wondered how he would sound without the translation chip, or whether he would still hold her gaze if she removed the veil that shimmered across her skin like a barrier of stars. But curiosity turned to ache, and ache turned to want. And want was treason when you bore the blood of the throne. He was assigned to her delegation, now meant to shadow her movements as part of the integration protocols, and when he entered the room, she felt it before she saw it. The shift in air, the alert in her pulse, the way her fingers clenched around the ceremonial scepter like a lifeline. And he greeted her with the same maddening softness that made her feel like she was the one unprepared. He said her name not with reverence, not with fear, but with care, and she felt her name become a prayer instead of a burden. And that was when she realized something far worse than attraction was happening, something that reached beyond biology and diplomacy, and into the part of her no one had touched, not even her own soul. They met in the arboretum on the edge of the station, surrounded by flora imported from dying planets and frozen moons, and she pretended it was about strategy, about diplomacy, about mutual understanding, but the truth pulls beneath her skin like wildfire. And he sat across from her with a patience that burned and waited for her to speak. She asked him why he looked at her like that, like she wasn't wearing centuries of duty, like she wasn't untouchable. And his answer was simple yet devastating. He said, "Because you look like you're waiting to be seen, and my eyes don't know how to lie." And it wasn't the words that undid her, it was the way he said them, like he was giving her back to herself. And suddenly all the walls shed, worn like armor, felt like cages. All the teachings felt like echoes in a hall long abandoned. And all she could think about was how her heartbeat sounded when he was near, not like war drums, but like a new language being born. And she wondered if he could hear it too. He never stepped closer, he never reached out, but his stillness was a gravity all its own. And when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a planet trying to prove itself. She saw a man who would sit with her in silence for 1,000 lifetimes, just understand the storm inside her, and that terrified her more than any weapon. She wanted to scream at him, to stop, to blink, to turn away, to do anything that would let her breathe again, but instead she asked him what humans called the feeling when the world tilted and your chest hurt. But you didn't want it to stop, and he said, "We call that falling." The royal court noticed her distraction. Her advisors whispered about manipulation and weakness, and her mother called her into the chamber of truths and reminded her that alien blood had no place beside the royal line, and that emotions were tools, not rulers, and that her heartbeat was a private failure she must correct. But how could she correct something that no longer belonged to her? How could she stop her pulse from quickening when Taran merely entered a room? How could she unremember the warmth in his voice, or the aching gentleness in the way he never asked for more, yet always gave it? They placed her under watch, dressed it as security, increased diplomatic briefings, and layered expectations upon her until her spine felt like it would snap, but she bore it all with a still face and silent screams, until the one night she slipped through the gravestone gardens and found him watching the stars from the cold glass balcony alone, as if he had been waiting for her. He didn't say a word as she approached, didn't flinch when she stood so close that her veil whispered against his breath, and she asked him again, "Why are you looking at me like that?" And this time, his voice trembled when he said, "Because when I look away, it feels like I'm missing something I was never supposed to find." And her knees weakened, and the stars blurred, because this wasn't a crush. This wasn't desire. This was something that could break worlds. They caught them together, of course, not in a scandalous embrace, not in forbidden contact, but simply sitting beneath the violet sky, with their foreheads nearly touching, speaking in a language only hearts knew, and that was enough to send shock through the throne rooms and fury through her bloodline. Taran was detained, reassigned, ordered back to Earth, but he resisted with a calm so infuriating it made the guards nervous. And when she demanded his release, they told her that her judgment had been compromised, and for the first time, she screamed loud enough to crack the ceiling above her and silence an entire court. She chose him, and it wasn't dramatic or political. It was as simple as choosing the one who had seen her, the one who never asked her to be anyone but herself. And she stood before the empire and said, "I will not marry for alliance. I will not reign with an empty chest." And they called it madness. They called it betrayal, but her voice did not shake. She found him again before they could erase his memory, and she said nothing, just looked at him. And he understood, and reached for her hand. Not to pull, to possess, but to promise. And they ran, not in fear, but in defiance, in hope, in the name of something no crown could command. They fled to the outer systems, where law moved slower and love had time to grow, and she learned how to laugh without weighing each note. And he learned how to listen to silences, and they built a life not of thrones, but of truths. And every time he looked at her with that maddening, soft, unwavering gaze, her heart still raced, but now raced freely. She sent no word back to her people, but the stars carried rumors of a princess who chose a human who walks beside her, not behind, not ahead. And when emissaries came years later to ask her to return, she said the empire had always taught her to rule her heart, but it never taught her what to do when the heart ruled back. And still every morning she woke to his gaze, warm and patient, and every time she whispered, "You're doing it again," and he'd smile and say, "I know," and her pulse would surge, and she would press her forehead to his, and remember the question that started it all. "Why are you looking at me?"